The degrading images of black women were cemented in American culture centuries previous to the first rapper uttering the first words into a microphone. In fact, the English colonists accepted the Elizabethan image of the lusty Moor, and Moor was the term for the Elizabethan black, and used this and similar stereotypes to justify the enslavement of blacks. In part, this was accomplished by arguing that we were subhumans, that blacks were subhumans, that we were intellectually inferior, that we were culturally stunted and morally underdeveloped with a bestial sexuality. So the hypersensualized stereotype of the black woman was used during slavery as a rationalization for sexual relationships between the white men and the black women, the slave and the master, especially sexual unions of that type. In fact, the black woman was depicted as a woman with an insatiable appetite for sex. She was not satisfied with black men. It was claimed that the female slave desired sexual relationships with the white men. Isn't that interesting? To just imply that, to justify it. But that's the time that we were in, at that time. In slavery, you didn't have an option of how you wanted to be, referred to. You were property, and so you were whatever they said you were. This is how actually that sexualization as referring to black men was also done during this time. The black man was considered this big, virile beast, and there were a lot of sexual assumptions that were made regarding the black man's virility. And this is why you had a lot of the white slave owner wives would sneak in the back, and want to, have that forbidden fruit. And even to this day, there are some, not all, but there are some interracial couples whose entire attraction to each other is based on that slave master fantasy. They may not say it, but a lot of times the white female, if it's a male to female, and the white female, she's thinking she's got that Mandingo warrior, whether he is or not, that's her fantasy. And then the black man, he's probably figuring he's getting even with the white man for whatever, issues he had or his family had or the family's family had. And that's good if that's what works for y'all. But I'm just saying that the whole sexualization of us as uncontrollable beasts comes from that time. So we should be cognizant of it. James Redpath, who was of all things an abolitionist, he wrote that slave women were gratified by the criminal advances of Saxons. In other words, we love being raped. I don't know who loves being raped. I mean, some rough and rape is not the same thing. Okay, so, these were his revelations, and that white men did not have to rape black women. This view is contradicted by Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist and former slave, who claimed that the slave is at the mercy of the fathers, sons, or brothers of her master. Ain't that the truth? And Douglass's account is consistent with the accounts of other former slaves. In Narrative of the Life and Adventures of Henry Bibb, an American slave, Bibb tells of how his master forced a young slave to be his son's concubine. And later, Bibb and his wife were sold to a Kentucky trader who forced Bibb's wife into prostitution. So, I didn't even know the slave masters were pimping, so I'm actually learning something with that bit of information. Slave women were, in fact, property. Therefore, legally, they could not be raped. And often the slave owners would give gifts or promises or reduce labor if the slave women would consent to sexual relations. In depicting the black woman as a modest and lacking in sexual restraint, as ordinary articles such as ashtrays, postcards, sheet music, fishing lures, drinking glasses, and they all featured scantily clad black women. these sexually explicit items, were they such of these, they were not made in the image of white women. Not during that time. Now, they may have very well come later or earlier, but not during that time. So, however, but they were never mainstreamed like the objects that caricatured us. So they may have been made, but they didn't get the popularity, and novelty objects that depicted white women during that time, if they did have them, if somebody did have them, like what you call the bootlegs of today, it was done on the down low, much like today. Okay, and, an analysis of these racist items, it reveals that black female children were also sexually objectified. They had black girls with the faces of pre-teenagers. They were drawn with adult-sized buttocks, which were exposed, and they were naked, scantily clad, or hiding seductively behind a towel, a blanket, a tree, or some other object. So where is all this coming from? I mean, as we entered, now I can only talk about the period in which I was around. So I was born in the 50s, and I saw that as we entered the 60s and the early 70s, the vestiges, and I told you this earlier, of the old mammy and the pickaninny, these caricatures were replaced. So the things that, those movies that they did, Gone with the Wind and all those other movies where they showed, the sisters, maids and mammies and all of that. Instead, after Pam Grier, and I'm not blaming a sister, you got to do what you got to do. But after that Pam Grier era, up to it, and a little bit beyond it, the 60s and 70s, there was the super sexualized female, the super sex woman, as well as the male. There was the males too. And they were protagonists and heroines, and often they were in the form of prostitutes, coffee, or women using sex as a means to the greater end of achieving a vendetta. So these films, they came about and they were named blaxploitation movies. And these movies were supposedly steeped in the black experience. However, many were produced and directed by white people. Author and historian Daniel J. Leab, in his narrative, Sambo is Super Spade, The Black Experience in Motion Pictures, he wrote that whites packaged, financed, and sold these films, and they received the bulk of the big money. The world depicted in blaxploitation films included corrupt police, politicians, pimps, drug dealers. Well, that's pretty much true. Violent criminals, prostitutes, and whores. But in the main, these movies were low budget. They were definitely formulas because everyone was the same. Of black life by white producers, directors, and distributors. The black actress and the actresses following these movies, many of them were unable to find work in mainstream movies, and they found themselves limited to these blaxploitation movies. Black patrons supported these movies because black people were in them, and they felt that by supporting them, they were fighting the white establishment, resisting the pigs that were in control of their fate and sexual beings. The parallels to this period and where we find ourselves today in regard to sexist hip-hop, I mean, the parallels are erroneous perceptions that certain images were and are indeed, steeped in the true black experience. Who controlled and controls the production and distribution of the black product? The preeminence of distorted sexual roles, and who is proportionately, or who does benefit financially from this destructive typecasting. It is a painful reality that the lack of real opportunities can sometimes tempt us to co-facilitate in our own cultural demise. Ain't that the truth? Can somebody say sell out as we engage in endeavors that aid in the buttressing and reinforcement of pernicious and racist stereotypes? Because the bottom line, just like then, so is today, we are living stereotypes. We're not trying to step out of that box. We are still in the box that we were put in. And why? Why so many of us have given, they call me a whore, I might as well look like one, or, okay, well, they think I'm a sexual beast, let me be one. And then this, this whole mentality, it's deep, to say the least. I mean, Toni Morrison, in addressing the dynamics of racial and gender internalized oppression in her novel, The Bluest Eye, stated that it was as though some mysterious all-knowing master had said, "You are an ugly people, And they, black folk, took the ugliness in their hands, threw it as a mantle over them, and went about the world with it. And, we as black people, male and female, have now taken ownership, or taken it in our hands, as it was, this deplorable legacy, and have worn this disgraceful and destructive garment proudly. We have indeed gone about the world with it. We in the black community who have consumed, purchased, and repeated the words and images, we, black male and female exploiters of black sexuality, we have participated in this dishonor. And we are like the Laodiceans, who were rebuked by Christ because they were convinced that they were rich and increasing with goods and had need of nothing without understanding. And we are in the Laodicean age. We're living in the age of the Laodicean church. This is a fact. So it shouldn't surprise a lot of you good Christians out there, if you know your Bible, that, these Laodiceans, they thought they had a need of nothing without realizing that they were blind, wretched, miserable, and naked. And like Esau, we gave up our God-given birthright that entitled us to something better for a mess of pottage for us that satiate us for only a little while, with nothing to show but the bitter and foolish trade, but plain regret and longing. Seeing that her womb supplied the steady flow of slaves that facilitated the accumulation of wealth for the plantation owners in the various industries in which this country thrives, rice, the Carolina rice, hint, hint, cotton, we already know the deal with that, tobacco. How you think Winston and all these old companies, they became millionaires? What's that broad, she was one of the Winstons, and all those very wealthy families. They started somewhere. Somebody was a poor farmer, and he got an idea that, hey, instead of chewing this tobacco, why don't we roll it up and smoke it? Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Okay, so my point is, America was built in large part on the sexual exploitation of the black woman. With the coffers of the major networks that own the record labels and the music video networks bursting from the profits of this new millennium's minstrel show, because that's really what it is. Young Money ain't nothing but young monkeys. That's the center ring. Then you've got these other clowns on the first and the third ring. It's a circus. It's a minstrel show. It's a malicious irony of epic and tragic proportions that we have now come full circle. Okay, I'm going to pause here because this annoying dog is here, and I realize that he's not going to stop barking because there's some other mutt across the street that's talking to him. And I guess, I'm infringing on dog rights. So I'll be back with my final word. Okay, so I'm going to pretty much wind it down from here. I think you get the idea. It's $1 billion industry. Every 5 records sold in America, 80% of the buyers are white. Why? Because we download. But I'm kidding. Some of us do, though. Okay, so the music that now generates over $10 billion per year, and this is according to Forbes, magazine. That's Malcolm's magazine, and he's always telling everybody business. He knows how much everybody makes. And it was initially ignored by corporate America. They don't take his word as bond. So now corporations, they use phrases, images, and the sounds of hip hop to sell everything from McDonald's menus, dollar menus, to the Cadillacs. I mean, this is de rigueur these days. But when Forbes first said it, no one was trying to hear it. Corporate America ignored him. Okay, so even though the faces of hip-hop are predominantly black, the real players are at Universal and Viacom. They're pushing the green or the red button or what gets produced and promoted in hip-hop. The societal need and the function of mass media and pop culture, it's all popular, and everything that is popular with it is fraudulent. It's constructed of whatever the powers that be say it is. So it is right now, we, black women, are allowing ourselves to still be sexually exploited. And somewhere along the line, sisters, we've got to pull it back, because these young sisters, they're looking at us. A young girl said to me, she says, you know what, Miss Holly, she was one of my subscribers, she still is. She said, I blame your generation for the way that we are now. She said, we act the way we act because my mother and her sister, they were whores when they were young. They tell us how they did what they did, and so and so in my family had her first kid at 14, and so yes, so the children, they look at us and they see how we are and who we are, and they become us. You know, if the corporations want to push anti-woman and sexist music, say they decide, okay, let's pump millions of dollars into the budget of some rapper and have him promote anti-woman and sexist music, they will find someone ignorant enough to write the lyrics. Trust and believe. Won't be no SAR search for that. They'll find them quickly. And, you know, the artist can choose to make something different. But if they do, they don't have the backing that the others do, who do agree to play the game. So by all means, hip-hop and all artists of all genres who are guilty of producing misogynistic and sexist messages in lyrics and videos, and you're morally and you're politically accountable, because you're contributing to the image of black women as a sex object. And although you're guilty of providing the supply, it's American culture that created the demand. Okay, that's it for now. I so look forward to your comments on this one. God bless you and thanks.